Hello, photographers. Real quick before we get started, the 2020 5-day deal photography bundle is available now, but it's only available until October 20th, 2020. You can get $3,000 worth of photography education for under $100. Check out the link, and now let's get on to the video. Today I want to share with you the best settings for flash photography. Now we got to lay down some ground rules for this because taking a photo is something that's uniquely you and unique to the situation you are working from. What I'm giving you here is a starting point for your settings that you can then work from, change, and build on to tweak and make your photo your photo. So these are the parameters. First, your camera settings. Your base ISO is the ISO that this is building off of, ISO 100 on most cameras. And then the aperture is f7.1. Now, don't worry if you don't shoot f7.1. Maybe you want to shoot f2.8, maybe you want to shoot f16. I'll show you how to modify based on that. This is just our baseline aperture of f7.1. The shutter speed doesn't really matter because the shutter speed doesn't actually affect your flash exposure. I'm assuming that you're using your sync speed, but you could use slower if you're working with ambient light. Now, the other thing we're assuming is that you're using a standard speed light. If you're using a different kind of light, this isn't going to apply, but these are the most common lights that people have. I'm also going to talk about your settings using a Godox AD200 because that's another very common light. With those parameters laid out, here's how to nail exposure with flash by setting your lights up just like I'm about to explain. First is those camera settings that I detailed. Next is your flash is positioned from the front of the light 3 feet away from your subject, right? So 3 feet from here to here, wherever you're shooting. Then set your flash power to 1/16 if you're using the bare flash just like this. And if you do that, you'll get an exposure that looks like this. Now, this is not the best photo in the world. We're not looking for, quote unquote, the best photo in the world. What we're looking at is the exposure explicitly. That's all we're looking at here. Because like I said, your flash photo is going to be your photo. You're going to be trying to accomplish different things. And I'm just giving you a starting point for getting your flash exposure correct. Now, you might be thinking, well, what if I don't want to use a bare light? What if I want to use an umbrella? If you're using an umbrella, and that umbrella is 3 feet from your subject. So you have your light, and then in front of your light, you have your umbrella. From the umbrella to your subject is once again 3 feet. Set the power on the flash to 1/4 power, and you'll get an exposure that looks like this. Beautiful exposure. Once again, we're not concerned with the quality of this photo. We're just looking at the exposure. So these are a starting point for you. Now, what if you don't want your light to be 3 feet from your subject? What if it needs to be farther away? Maybe your light needs to be 6 feet away. If you're using a bare speed light, 6 feet away from your subject, camera settings are the exact same. Now what you're going to do is set your flash power to 1/4 power. And if you do that, you'll get an exposure that looks like this. Once again, good, decent exposure. We're not talking about the quality of the photo, just where the light's positioned, what your camera settings are, and what your flash settings are. And I've also got the umbrella covered. If you have your light 6 feet away and an umbrella on it, then set your flash power to full power. And that'll give you an exposure that looks like this. Okay, so these are your base settings right here. You can see them on screen with all of the parameters. And if you make note of all of this, then you can use these to set your lights up. So now let's talk about how you vary this stuff. Okay, first let's talk about an AD200 versus one of these. If you're using an AD200 by Godox is about twice as powerful as a standard speed light. And because it's twice as powerful, you would then just use a setting that is half as bright. So if you're using the bare Godox light 3 feet from your subject, instead of 1/16 power, you'd go with 1/32 power. And if you're using an AD200 3 feet from your subject with an umbrella, then instead of going for 1/4 power, you'd go with 1/8 power. At the 6 foot distances, you'd take the bare light to 1/8 power, and you'd take the umbrella light to 1/2 power. Now, let's talk about varying your camera settings. What if you vary your ISO or your aperture? This is super easy to adjust for because all you have to do is figure out how many stops you've adjusted your settings and then adjust your light to counter that. Let me give you an example. Let's say instead of shooting at f7.1, you want to shoot at f2.8. If we have the bare speed light at 3 feet away from the subject, we already know that if the aperture is f7.1, the power on the flash should be at 1/16. f2.8 is 2 2/3 stops away from f7.1. And f2.8 is a much larger aperture, which means it's going to let in more light. And what that means is we have to reduce the power on the light 2 2/3 stops. So if I go down from 1/16, one stop is going to be 1/32nd, 2 stops is going to be 1/64th, and 2 more thirds means I'm at 1/64th minus 2/3 of a stop. And now if I do that, I'll get the exact same exposure as I got at f7.1 at 1/16th power. That's all you got to do. If you adjust one of your settings, adjust the power on the flash to compensate for it, and you'll maintain the exposure at the base. So that's it. The best settings are the settings that you need to get the shot, but this is your starting point, your baseline, so that you can nail your exposure quickly and then adjust as needed to get your settings where you want them to accomplish what you want in your photo. Thank you for watching, and don't forget about the 5-day deal. In fact, my new video course, Beyond Manual Mode, is launching with this year's 5-day deal. Beyond Manual Mode is all about building on the fundamentals to help you do 2 things. First is to learn more about the camera and how it works so that you can use your camera to its maximum potential. Second is to embrace and extend your creativity so that you can make images instead of just taking photos. The lessons in Beyond Manual Mode weave together the technical and the creative to give you the tools to start exploring your photography more intensely and more creatively. And like all of my courses, it is packed with fun, practical, and easy to follow lessons to help you bring what's in your head to life in your photos. Specifically, Beyond Manual Mode has 17 brand new video lessons covering things like dynamic range, how to give control back to the camera, color theory, and a bunch more different stuff. And that is just my course. The 5-day deal has courses from amazing educators like Matt Granger, Jessica Whitaker, Joel Grimes, and Jerry Giannis. In fact, I am excited to go through Joel Grimes' One Light Masterclass course. And that is right, I've already purchased the 5-day deal for myself. I mean, why wouldn't I? It is an incredible value. Now, the 5-day deal doesn't last long. It's right in the name, and you only have until October 20th, 2020 to get this deal. So go check it out at this link and then take some damn photos.